What's up, RotoViz?
Welcome into the RotoViz Fantasy Football Podcast. It's week one, start, sit, and player projections. Dave Caban and I are going to be doing this every Thursday night for about 30 minutes before Thursday night football kickoff. It's going to be fun to hang with the RotoViz radio podcast crew and get questions from people that are, struggling. And man, we couldn't get off to a more intriguing start in week one because Travis Kelce's been ruled out for this game. If you haven't been listening to the news or you haven't been on your Twitter feed and you just clicked into this because you subscribe to the channel, Travis Kelce is not playing. So we got to talk a lot about, where can we look for other tight ends that we could maybe stream there, that you could pick up off your waiver wire and start in week one. And what does it mean for the rest of the Kansas City Chiefs tonight? You can go ahead and start posting questions in the chat. I'll be answering questions for about 30 minutes, right up until a few minutes before kickoff. I'm going to answer everything I can. If you want to guarantee that your question is going to be answered, you can use the super chat function. But again, all that's going to do is really bump you to the front of the line. I am going to try to get to everything that I can. Dave is joining me in a few minutes. He's having some technical difficulties switching to a different laptop there. So go ahead and start throwing your start-sit questions or just questions about the Chiefs-Detroit game in general in the chat. And I'm going to start going through the Kansas City Chiefs offense in general here. Now, when we look at what Kelce was going to potentially do, I want to go into our RotoViz game-level similarity projections and talk about what type of game, he was going to potentially have. He was rated as a top 5 tight end this week with this matchup against Detroit. When we sort on the 50th percentile at tight end, he was tight end 5. When we sort on the 75th percentile, he actually was more of a lower end QB1. So, our tools not necessarily thinking this was going to be a smash game for Kelce anyway. That gives us some opportunities to look for some other players. One thing that I would say is I think a lot of people who have drafted Travis Kelce and are aggressive at the tight end position in general, you may have followed up with somebody like Dalton Kincaid as a rookie tight end, and our tools love Dawson Knox's matchup. The tools do not yet know that Dalton Kincaid is probably the number one receiving option at that position for the Bills. So if you're rostering Dalton Kincaid or he's available in your shallow redraft league, that type of thing, that's an easy slam dunk of a swap out for Kelce. You also see some players like Juwan Johnson for the New Orleans Saints. I'm not sure he's universally rostered in shorter redraft leagues and in deeper leagues. You're playing some high stakes Fantasy Pros championships, main events, or things like that. Juwan Johnson might be on your bench already. You could plug him in. If we go a little bit deeper, Gerald Everett, one of Dave Caban's favorites, one of Neil Dutton's favorites, also has a great matchup this week per the game level similarity projections, like matchups of a player of Everett's quality against his opponent. If we go on to page 2 here, let's just get a couple more names just to get this Kelce talk out of the way. Cade Otton as a bailout option in Tampa Bay. Cole Kmet might be a player that you had drafted to back up Kelce. You can sub him in. Hunter Henry, really low ADP, but Dave and I actually took him in our main event draft last night on the strength of what he could do in the Patriots offense now that they have a professional offensive coordinator. So I think 2021 numbers are probably closer to what we see for Hunter Henry this season versus the 2022 numbers. I see Dave has joined. And Dave, before we get to some of the questions in the chat, anything you want to add about this Kelce news with him being a scratch?
Not entirely sure exactly what you've covered. I guess the thing I would just say is I think that there's probably options out there for people on their waiver wire, maybe not the most attractive options approximating what Kelce would do. But, it's week one. There's probably some options out there that you can go and find of, players that people didn't draft. So hopefully everybody can weather this okay.
Mike and M asks the obvious question. So before we go to some of the other player versus player questions, let's finish out this Chiefs offense. If Kelsey's not going to play, who's going to touch the ball? And so I think most people that drafted Sky Moore probably playing, Sky Moore for sure now, if you weren't already. Most people that drafted Isaiah Pacheco probably playing Isaiah Pacheco. The guys that are more on the fringe, I think Marcus Valdes-Scantling, who was drafted probably for depth for most people, he definitely comes into play now. Now, again, our tools are not going to know that Kelsey is not playing, but we can look and see what they see in this matchup for Valdes-Scantling. I think we can go more towards that ceiling projection for him, knowing that the alpha target getters out of the offense, the tools like Marcus Valdes-Scantling at 9.6 PPR in his top quartile outcome. So I think that sounds very fair. 10 points from MVS as a streamer. The other people that you want to talk about, Kadarius Toney, Dave. With Kadarius Toney, it's just so tricky because of the injury, and he was kind of a late addition to the team for this week's game. But you think about some of those intermediate passes and the manufactured yards right at the line of scrimmage. The game level similarity projections actually like Toney even better than MVS here. So I think that's a great question, bringing him up specifically, Mike. 12.7 points as his ceiling quartile ceiling projection, if you will, for Kadarius Toney. I think he is definitely streamable. And then if you're kind of desperate at running back, maybe you're in one of these situations where you are thin, you drafted for zero RB mentality. Jerick McKinnon may be more in play here as well without Travis Kelce. So I think everybody now without Kelce's probably 10 or 11 targets he would have got in the opener. It's going to be a rising tide of targets that's going to lift all of the boats. Hopefully we covered that question there for you. Now we're going to go back to the top of the stream here. Anglo V Daspiris. I probably butchered that, but that's what I'm going for. Dave, he wants to know
RB. Maybe. I don't know.
What's
Continue. That? I think I was saying Anglov Daspiris is how I might pronounce it, but
okay, we're probably both wrong for sure. But your questions on the show, my friend. Breece Hall, J.K. Dobbins, or Raheem Mostert at RB2 is his question. Now, can you throw in the chat here? Would one of these guys also be getting bumped to your flex here, or are those positions already filled with other wide receivers? If you're just asking me to rank these three for week one, I'm going to rank them Dobbins, Hall, Mostert. Let's see if the tools agree. Dave, how would you personally rank this trio for an RB2 spot here?
Yeah, for this week, I think Dobbins is clearly the favorite there. Breece, we still have to see how things work with him starting off the season, coming off of that big injury. And then Mostert, I think there's some questions there too, exactly how things will play out in game one in that Dolphins offense. So I put it Dobbins, Hall, Mostert. My expectation would be that we're going to see that the tools might like Hall a little bit more than Dobbins, but there's some factors that it can't control for.
Yeah, they don't know that Dalvin Cook is in town. They don't know that the team is going to manage his touches, which they've been very clear about. If he was fully healthy, he would be the smash play here. Right. Now, what's interesting is with Miami's skinny running back core early in the season and Jeff Wilson being on IR, are the tools really do like Raheem Mostert here? I've got him head-to-head against J.K. Dobbins. Actually considerably more ceiling from a GLSP perspective here. So if you're in a situation where you want a little bit more floor, I'm still trusting Dobbins there because I just think that Ravens offense is going to be easier to project based off of the strength of what Dobbins did at the end of 2022 here, Anglo. But if you need a little bit of a higher ceiling, the tools do like Mostert there. So I'm going to stick by my original thought here with Dobbins, Hall, and Mostert in that order. If you need to use one in the flex, you're going to go to Hall. And if you can use both in the flex, then just dropping Mostert in there. The next question that came in, Dave, flex choose one. Sky Moore, Brian Robinson, Javonte Williams, or George Pickens. Man, this is probably an awesome team. You can only play one of these guys. That's the first question. Where does your brain go on this one? And I'm going to pull it up in the tools here.
So my brain actually, I think, goes to – it originally went to George Pickens.
Half PPR.
But then I thought a little bit more, went to Brian Robinson.
I think half PPR is key here because I almost would like to take, roll the dice, go on a little bit of a gamble here with Sky Moore. The tools definitely like Javonte Williams over Brian Robinson here. And Sean Payton did say that Javonte is going to have a very healthy role here in week one. It seems like the health outlook has just gotten better and better as the weeks have gone on for him in Denver. And we don't exactly know what's going to happen with Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson. I just think the talent comparison there is so much closer than it is between Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine.
Should be good game script, though, for the Commanders.
Sure. They'll be out ahead, and we would expect Robinson to be probably the closer over Gibson. Yeah. We can only choose one, though, and we got to go for some ceiling here. Now let's check out Pickens and Moore, just in case you end up needing to start one of them. Maybe one of the wide receivers goes down. Let's just cut up the entire deal here. So for Sky Moore, again, it doesn't know that Travis Kelce's out. The tools say in half PPR that Pickens is the clear choice there. And, he is probably more of a threat to score touchdowns just based off of, his role in the Steelers offense versus how we've seen or not seen Sky Moore deployed to this point. So I'm actually going to go here. I think I'm going to rank it Javonte Williams, Brian Robinson, George Pickens, Sky Moore in that order. And Dave, it sounds like you might prefer Robinson. Who would your number 2 be? That might break the tie for us.
I think I'd put I actually would probably put Pickens in at my number 2.
And Javonte Williams number 3?
Javonte Williams number 3, and then Sky Moore number 4.
Okay. All right. Well, here on this
helps, but
it helps so much as Steven has to choose. I mean, he's got to choose which analyst he's going to trust this week. I'm saying Javonte. Dave says Brian Robinson. We both like Pickens, so that's your bailout option. How about that, Steven? Best of luck to you in your matchup this week. Andrew Winkler, is Josh Reynolds likely to have the second highest target share for the Lions? I mean, likely is that's a strong word there. I think we can safely say the sun god, Amon-Ra St. Brown, is going to lead that team in targets for sure. After that, I think it could be flat between Reynolds and Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm actually going to call my shot and say Jahmyr Gibbs has the second most targets on the team.
I think in terms of the players at wide receiver, tight end for Detroit, I don't know if I'd be going after a player just because they're going to have the second highest target share. Like Curtis said, it's probably figures to be pretty flat. And, the second highest share might only be like 4 targets in a game like this. We really just don't know exactly what to expect yet. So I would almost prefer, I'd have to see who the other options are if, you're asking that question to try to find somebody to plop into your lineup. I might try to target somebody that just, maybe has a higher chance of scoring a touchdown if they're only going to have like 2 or 3 opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, the context matters. I don't know if this could be, a Thursday night DFS type of question if we're talking about Josh Reynolds, because you're not in many league formats probably talking about him unless it's maybe like a 14-team dynasty league or something like that. I could see this question coming in. So let's see here. ZB, Sky Moore over Jackson Smith and Najigba or Brian Robinson. Oh man. So JSN got the wheels up, Dave. I don't know if you saw that today. He is going to be playing this weekend. Yeah. Yep. Very, very exciting. I think I would like for week 1, I think now at this point with no Kelce, I go Sky Moore over Jackson Smith and Najigba just for week 1 because of, relative ease of earning targets. With Brian Robinson, then it gets tricky again because, now we're not talking about another player that's going to have a lot of, guaranteed touches. We don't know what the Chiefs will do with Sky Moore. We haven't seen him in this new role yet. Brian Robinson really was toting the rock quite a bit. We expect him to crush the Cardinals and perhaps him ice that game away. I think in this situation for PPR, I'm going to go with a ranking of Brian Robinson and then Sky Moore and then JSN for week 1. If it's a close matchup and you want that floor, I still say, even though Dave likes that game script for the Commanders, I still just am not quite sure about what that timeshare looks like in that backfield. And maybe they get up and ice the game, but maybe Gibson was the guy that that put him away to begin with. If you need that big ceiling, man, there's something about that Thursday night, week 1, Mahomes in his opening day starts, Dave, 19 touchdowns, 0 interceptions for his career. So I do still say if you need a ceiling play, you're playing a team that's starting, Justin Jefferson and Christian McCaffrey or something crazy, some crazy combo, and you need that big ceiling outcome, I'm going to go Sky Moore there. All right.
Yep.
Andrew confirmed for us it was more of a DFS question. So yeah, I think that helps. That referring to the Josh Reynolds question. Mike and M, Trevor Lawrence or Geno Smith? I actually have this very same dilemma in a couple of my rosters, Mike. So let's get out the GLSP here and take a look and see what it says. Compare the curves here on these two players, and then we can add, our own context here. So Trevor Lawrence, I mean, he's got to be one of the highest projected quarterbacks of the week with a 75th percentile projection of 27.2 points. We don't see that.
He's QB5 this week, according to GLSP average projections. And also, if you look at above 25, he's significantly ahead of Geno Smith as well. Almost 14% more of his matches went for 25 or more points than Geno Smith. So he's pretty much, the play over Smith across the board where you're looking for. So to me, this is actually a fairly easy one. The other thing to keep in mind, too, is that you're going to have Lawrence playing against a Colts team that, might not be as competitive as the Rams are going to be able to be with the Seahawks, or I guess from a, overall type of game flow perspective, I'd much rather have Lawrence in that matchup where I would expect his team to kind of dominate.
Yeah, I think I would rather have Lawrence anyway, but seeing this in the GLSP really confirms it. I realized just now I wasn't sharing my screen when we were talking about this at first. Let's zoom in here a little bit and look at the distribution. The gray bar is Trevor Lawrence here, and the red bar is Geno Smith. When we look at their distributions like above 20 and 25 fantasy points, imagine stacking these two red bars and these two gray bars. Lawrence just has so many more matches in his 50 similar GLSP scores that are higher than Geno. So, I mean, I think this is a firm answer of Trevor Lawrence over Geno Smith on this question. Thanks, Mike, for that one. Let's get to Joe Schmo here. Sam Laporta, Luke Musgrave, or Dalton Kincaid? Yes, I have all the rookies, LOL. It's a fun year. It's a fun year to build a trio like that, man.
Yeah, it is.
And I think they've all got a lot of upside. I'm ordering for this week. I'm going to actually order, unless we get different clarification out of Green Bay. Right now, it looks like we're probably not going to have Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs. It's possible we might get one of them. I mean, Musgrave could be the number one pass catching offense or option in Green Bay this week. Right now, I would order it Musgrave, Kincaid, Laporta. If Christian Watson plays, I would flip my answer to Kincaid here over Musgrave. Yeah. Musgrave. Either way, Laporta would probably be my number 3, at least here in week 1. Dave, how do you see this one?
Yeah, I think obviously you have to monitor what is going on in Green Bay. But if we do have Dobbs or particularly Watson going, then I think that Musgrave probably falls third in line for me here. And I'd place Kincaid, then Laporta, then Musgrave. Really, the way that I'm breaking that is just by looking at the teams that they're on. Also, Kincaid and Laporta, if you want to split hairs between them, I think that's probably the best way to go ahead and do that. And then finally, if you look in the passing game matchup rater for tight ends, what you're going to find is that the Jets are a little bit more favorable of a matchup here for Kincaid than what you're going to have there for Laporta playing against Kansas City. In fact, last year, Kansas City was a harder matchup for tight ends by a pretty significant margin when we look at the expected points that you would expect tight ends to score based upon their seasonal averages and how they actually scored. Much more favorable in the case of Kincaid here.
All right. So I think we're aligned there. The guidance here, Joe, is watch the news on the Green Bay wide receivers. If we get clarification, one of those top two guys is going, flips to Kincaid as an easy answer for both Dave and I. Mike came back around here and said ESPN rankings actually had Geno a full point ahead of Lawrence. We're not going to talk about other sites' rankings.
I'll just give this comment. I think that if you were sitting down and doing a subjective projection, you probably end up with that, because what you're probably thinking is that Jacksonville gets ahead very early, which limits the total number of passing plays that you have for the team. As a result of that, if you're rolling up a quarterback projection, doing it off of the receivers, you're not going to end up with that many points.
Yeah. The way that I tend to think about these things is, how did you score the touchdowns when you actually got the lead? Like, right. I know the temptation is think about the second half, but there's so many situations where, Holmes throws 48 touchdowns. All right, well, right. He throws a lot of them in the first half. Exactly. So it's just, Mike, appreciate you sharing the other sites. Dave and I are in lockstep on Lawrence here. Hope that works out for you. Obviously, you want our advice, you wouldn't be watching this show here. Malachi says, would you guys start Mixon or Pacheco? Even with Kelsey out, it's Mixon for me. I'm consulting a couple of different tools here to make sure that my leaning is on point here. One thing that I haven't used yet in the show tonight is the Game Splits app. And so I'm just going to pull up Joe Mixon last 2 seasons versus Cleveland. He's been right in line with his per game scoring averages in PPR against Cleveland. Not much higher, not much lower, 17.8. When I flip over to the GLSP,
where he's a top 5 running back this week.
He's a top 5 running back. Absolutely. His 50th percentile projection is actually 15.1 PPR compared to 12.3 for Pacheco. Even if you want to nudge that up for Pacheco, let's say another 1.5 on another couple carries and a couple extra yards, or, increased touchdown probability. It's very difficult for Pacheco to start pacing with Mixon's 22.7 top quartile projection. So,
plus half of his matches, half of his 50 matching players scored a touchdown rushing, and then 10% added a receiving touchdown too. So a lot of, scoring upside too for him.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think this is a good question, specifically with that temptation to get some points in this Thursday night game. So Malachi, this is probably an RB2 question for you, probably. Pacheco comes into play maybe against some of your flex players, but we're going Mixon here on this one. Joe confirming Musgrave. Yeah, Joe's going to go with our advice there. Let's see. James Mendez. For my RB2 spot in a PPR league, I have James Cook, David Montgomery, or Dalvin Cook. I'm leaning towards James Cook. Secondly, without Kelsey, I took Laporta, thought about Irv Smith as a replacement. Dave, I'm going to take a look at these tight ends. Why don't you cut up these running backs?
Yeah, I think for me, for the running backs here, it's James Cook, probably by a fairly wide margin. I think heading into that team's first game, our expectation is that we see James Cook controlling a very healthy portion of the receiving work, also the rushing work, playing in the best offense of the options right here. I've talked about heading into the season how I think there's a really good chance for James Cook to finish as an RB1, and I would not be shocked at all if we see that starting to happen this week against the Jets on Monday night. So that's a fairly easy one for me there. The tight end question might be a little bit tougher, but it looks like Curtis.
I'm taking this tight end one, man. I've got this one. The passing game matchup rater has this one on lock. Let's look at Laporta.
Just published the new version of this last night too, so it's exciting to see it up here on the stream.
Yeah, it's so cool, man. You did a great job with this tool. So we're looking at fantasy points over expectation allowed by a defense against the opposing position. So we're going to look at the defenses against opposing tight ends. What did they do versus expectation? Cleveland, actually the stingiest defense in terms of allowing fantasy points versus expectation, actually only allowed 53% of the expected points to tight ends. And I think their last 6 games is the way you have this built. So again, that's last year. Some things have changed with the defense. Irv Smith, a new player in the Cincinnati offense. You add in here that Joe Burrow, a little bit ouchy, doesn't sound fully confident. I think he's probably going to play, but he didn't necessarily sound like he's really raring to go. that actually feeds back maybe into that Mixon question that we just took as well. If we look at Laporta, I mean, it's not necessarily that KC was a great matchup compared to other teams in the league, but they were at least not in the bottom 10 against that position last year. And then if I just think, Irv Smith's been in the league for several years now, has never really shown us those big splash games. I think Cincinnati has a good role for the tight end position, but there's a lot of factors at play here, including the opponent. I would roll the dice on Laporta in terms of replacing Kelsey there, James. So great question there. Kyle says Nico Collins or Breece Hall, half PPR. I'm going Breece Hall there.
Yeah, you got to go Breece Hall there. It's way too many questions for Nico Collins right now. Even if you knew that Collins was going to come out and have a pretty solid game, and you knew that guaranteed, I'm not sure that I would go with him over Hall.
All right, I am going to go ahead and sound, it's the 5-minute alarm. We're holding this to 30 minutes before Thursday Night Football. You don't have a lot of time to go in and change those lineups after you listen if you have Thursday night players. So in particular, if anybody that is logged in right now has any more questions about the Kansas City Chiefs or about the Detroit Lions, make sure you get those in. Mike, love you guys from RotoViz. Thank you, Mike. We love you too, bud. James Mendez says, also, I have Cortland Sutton over Sky Moore in the flex. Should I switch? Thanks, guys. All right, let's pull up. We've got the passing game matchup rater already pulled up. So let's look from a non-player perspective, and then we'll get into the GLSP to break this tie. I think this could be a bit of a difficult one, so it'll be fun to use the tools to help solve the question. So when we look at Kansas City versus Detroit, Detroit, a top 10 attractive defense to play wide receivers against, allowing 12% more fantasy points than expectation over the final 6 games of last season. Remind me who Denver has in week 1 off the top of my head. I don't have a schedule pulled up here, Dave.
Yeah. Denver draws a matchup with the Raiders, so divisional matchup to start things off.
Raiders, the second most attractive matchup. You can see them here at the top. Second most attractive matchup by position for the wide receivers. And we also know that Jerry Jeudy, highly questionable. Right. I think I like probably the floor and the ceiling situationally there a little bit better for Sutton. Also, Sutton just getting rave reviews in camp, as much as Team RotoViz and others have wanted Jeudy to really be the poster child and save his career and his dynasty value with a breakout this season. It seems like Sutton maybe is more likely to have the kind of that Michael Thomas role from that Sean Payton New Orleans Saints offensive scheme. So I'm going there, James. Good question. All right. Just a few minutes left here. We will keep the chat open in case there's any last minute questions. Dave, I am pumped that it's week 1 and we're setting lineups, man. I can't believe it. This 30 minutes flew by. Great engagement from the listeners. Can't wait to bring this show back as a feature and just provide some value to all of the listeners on the podcast. Hopefully some of the players that you're curious about as you listen to this on Friday morning even are going to be helpful to you because, we share teams across rosters, obviously here. I have to actually get Kelsey out of a few more of my lineups. So we're going to come to a close after this comment from Mike and M here. Just saw a tweet from Green Bay beat writer this afternoon. Dobbs was at practice. Yeah, I did see that he was at practice. He was limited, but he was at least out there. We're going to have to continue to monitor that, but for both of those players, but also for all of the others. While we're on Green Bay, and maybe this is a good way to end, we did talk about Green Bay in the context of what it would mean maybe for Luke Musgrave if both of these wide receivers were out. If you want to go ahead and look at our game level similarity projections for both Aaron Jones, who we know has been historically used in the passing game there in Green Bay, and even for A.J. Dillon. I think the team is going to reinvent around a commitment to the run here, especially early in the season as Jordan Love finds his flow. So if both these guys are out, I would bump A.J. Dillon up into flex territory and Aaron Jones probably and firmly into RB2 territory for week 1. Dave, anything you want to add before we come to a close here?
No, just it's been a lot of fun doing this. despite the fact that I had some technical challenges here. So I'm really looking forward to next week getting into some more of these questions and just watching this game, which should be a really, really fun way to start the year.
All right. Well, hey, to sign off, Dave, I did pour a Woodford Reserve. Oh, my screen's editing it out. It looks like I'm holding nothing. I did pour a Woodford Reserve double oaked. I have to work on that with my camera for next week. So, hey, cheers to everyone who called in tonight and gave us the comments. Best of luck in your week 1 matchups. And man, football is back, baby. We got Thursday night football. Can't wait to watch this matchup between the Lions and the Chiefs. This is Curtis and Dave signing.
What's up, RotoViz?